You built 42 Below from a garage idea into a listed brand and sold it to Bacardi for $138 million. You then co-founded the business bakery, you floated Ecoya, you bought Trilogy for $20 million and exited via a $211 million sale. As chair of Moa Group, you led the pivot from brewing to hospitality, and you own and operate the incredible Lake Hawea Station.
People often say, any regrets with 42 Below? And I go, yeah, I should have gone harder, faster, sooner. What was great about that time is that New Zealanders were proud of the cool brands. It was a time when I don't think I've ever been prouder of our country.
You shake hands on a $138 million deal and you walk out of the room. That's got to be a wild time.
Well, I guess I am a proud New Zealander. We've just been overseas, came back. I thought, great, we're coming back to New Zealand. It's springtime. There's all these issues in places like Gaza, Ukraine, or other parts of the world. Aren't we bloody lucky? New Zealand's going to be storming. Come back, and the mood here is really down. We need to reset and get a couple of runs on the board.
In 2022, Country Calendar released their most viewed episode of all time. Were you surprised at the response to that episode?
This week on Between Two Beers, we talk to Geoff Ross. Geoff is one of New Zealand's most successful businessmen with many strings to his bow. He built vodka company 42 Below from his garage to a sale of $138 million, bought Trilogy for $20 million and exited for $211 million, floated Ecoya, was the chair of Moa, and in 2017 bought Lake Hawea Station, a 6,500-acre farm which he now owns and operates. This ep is packed with so much gold. His marketing advice is world-class and his business lessons unmatched. We talk about his remarkable pivot to farming, the difficult response to his Country Calendar episode, and all the best yarns in between.
We both left this recording inspired and in awe of the life Geoff has lived. This was a really special one.
This episode is brought to you by our proud sponsors TAB. Got a hunch? Download the app today and get your bet on.
Seamus and I are also stoked to now be in partnership and dressed by Barkers. Check out their range at barkersonline.co.nz.
And finally, if you want one of our epic guests or us to MC or speak at your function or event, flick us a message at b2bspeakers.co.nz and we'll link you up with the perfect fit.
Enjoy. Geoff Ross, welcome to Between Two Beers.
G'day guys, great to be here.
We're very excited to have you, and I think our favourite type of guest is someone with a CV like yours whose sons or family members are fans of the show because they can just feed us all the goodness.
I believe we've made you cool again.
Yeah.
It's a big task, but thanks for trying at least.
Yeah, and they've introduced you to the show, so you've listened to a few episodes, and you kind of got a bit of a taste for what you're in store for.
We sure have. We've become a family of fans, actually.
Amazing.
Epic.
Amazing.
We're super excited for this one. I read your book, Every Bastard Says No, in the last week. Absolutely loved it and have loved learning all about your story. But we actually wanted to start with some chat about former guest of the show, Reeve. He has been one of our most popular guests this year. And in his episode, he talked about nearly dying on your farm down in Lake Hāwea. And we would love your version of events.
Yeah, well, Jay, I've known him for a long time. He's one of the world's great connectors. Somehow he seems to, be so good at just connecting all sorts of people. And so he called and said, hey, I want to bring a couple of mates to the farm. We want to do this big hike. We want to kind of test ourselves, So we said, yeah, no problem. Looking back, it was one of those things where a little small thing goes wrong and then another little small thing, then another little small thing. And it all led to, a time where, Jay and others were in a spot of bother. So they came down, they arrived a bit late, they got some gear, they didn't get all the gear they needed. The gear they got, they didn't really know what to do with. They didn't have the full suite of what they needed. I think they said their kind of skill set was perhaps a little more than what it actually was.
Did you have a sense maybe that there was a bit of GST added to Jay's capabilities when he arrived, but still kind of let it play out?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think when blokes get together, kind of they're all starting to add a bit of GST, and maybe there's quite a lot of inflation was going on. Yeah.
His retelling is amazing. So if for people that haven't heard, as you've summarised there, I think they get to the top of a goat track is what he describes on their way to a hut out the back of your station, and he decides to touch base with you, and I think he rings you directly.
Yeah, so on Lake Hawea Station, the front country's all in coverage. As soon as you go into the back country, it's not. So he gave us a call just as he crested the ridge, about to go into the back country, checking in. They were by that stage they were behind schedule. So, I kind of politely suggested you're going to need, lights. And do you actually want to carry on? Do you want to kind of come back and have a beer? You've had a good walk already. But they carried on. And we could see them because they had a little plotting device. So we knew where they were, but unfortunately, they didn't get to their final destination.
Yeah, so Jay's retelling is, I think they got to a point, there might be a second ridge that you've got to get over to get to there. He sent one of the guys forward because he'd broken down physically by this point. I think his words were 115 kgs of bad decisions. So they turn around. This is after 9 hours, maybe. I might be inflating the duration. And they get back to this original place that they've called you from and call you again, I think, looking for the cavalry to come in.
Yeah. So, look, I think Logan was with them. He's pretty fit. He was charging ahead. In actual fact, it was kind of like, Scotland in the Antarctic. They got to about 50 metres of the hut. Yeah. But by then their confidence was shot and they decided to come home. And so, we whipped up and picked them up.
And furious with Jay.
I wasn't, but I think his mates were, yeah.
What was that scene like when they kind of tail between legs trudged back in?
The vibe wasn't great, actually. I thought three close mates, they'll be fine through this. But there's clearly a bit of finger pointing going on, and it's amazing. And we might talk about this later on. When you kind of when something goes wrong or a lot of little things go wrong, things start to break down. You lose your belief, you lose your confidence, and then the fingers start pointing on each other. And that they're good-humoured guys, and we all got through it. But you could see that starting to happen. And maybe we'll talk about this a little later on. I wonder if we're starting to do a little bit of that as a country right now.
The way Jay sort of, like, he speaks of you in the highest regard, and he sort of said, he felt like a real piece of shit. But the way that you reframed...
And the other two were making him feel like that as well.
Yeah, but he said that the way that you reframed the experience to create incredible lessons, it stuck with him. Like, do you remember, is that something that just happens on the fly, or are you thinking about how you're going to sort of approach it?
Well, I could see they were, there was the first night of the boys' weekend away, and it hadn't gone to plan. So, they needed a bit of a lift, I guess, and I felt bad for Jay because this is his weekend to organise, so, the fingers were being pointed at him. So, I just started saying, hey, guys, you did really well. That's a huge walk. And just started looking forward, saying, hey, we can go for a hunt tomorrow. I've got this great spot. We can, we've seen some deer. We can go and look in that area to give them some other things to look forward to. More for Jay, so his mates weren't thinking, mate, you put us in a shitty situation this weekend.
I think Jay's retelling was it almost hearing you, or the calmness, I guess, of breaking that situation down, almost put a mirror in front of him to realise, actually, you do have to be prepared. You have to put these things in place to make sure it's successful. So just, I guess, that 180 on the experience is something that he's definitely taken away.
Well, good. No, they're all great guys. They were going to get through it anyway, but I'm glad we were able to help.
We've spoken to so many epic people in the prep for this. Your wife, Juzzy, is an incredibly accomplished woman who we're going to talk about. But I asked her to describe you, and I want to read what she said. He's a very considered person. He's a natural introvert. He can be quite socially awkward. I think one of the reasons he did so well in advertising in the 90s is that he's such a good, genuine, honest human, and the scene was awash with people with agendas and a less genuine intent. So he really stood out for his gentle, considered approach to everything. He's the kind of guy that is an excellent diffuser. If you put a problem on the table and it can be very emotional, deep, or difficult, he will just take a beat and then unpick it from every single possible perspective and work you through it in an absolute masterclass. Then he'll nail the 3 most salient points and then listen again. He's such a good listener. I don't think I've heard him say a bad word about anybody. I can't get him to be a bitch, and sometimes that's no fun. He loves what he loves. He's a man of the land, first and foremost. He's very serious about his commitments. He's often perplexed when he's dealing with less honourable people. I've seen him shake the hand of a man who duped us out of $1 million a week after it happened. He's a better human than most, that's for sure. I was flabbergasted. He still doesn't believe that someone's going to behave in a dishonourable way, and it bothers him. It really deeply bothers him. I come at it from a different approach, which is everyone's going to fuck you and let you down. He is a masterclass in giving everybody a chance. How did you do?
Well, very, kind words. Look, I think, going through some of those things, in advertising, I guess I was a bit of a rare breed in that I was from a rural background, and very rural. I'd gone through Lincoln, so there weren't too many farm folk in advertising in the 90s. So I think that was actually quite refreshing for a lot of clients. There's sometimes some of my colleagues may have referred to me as a bit of a hayseed, but I think it worked for me in many cases, just to have kind of that, I don't know, maybe a little bit more of a genuine connection.
Have you always been a good listener? Because prior to switching the microphones on, we had a conversation. I could see you really intently trying to get an understanding of where we might go with this conversation and the sort of direction that it might head. But it struck me straight away that, and I can see you doing it now, you're intently listening to and almost forming clearly what you want to say before you say it.
Well, I hope so. Well, I think listening is really important, So, I think it's a really, really valuable skill for all of us.
One of the examples there, we don't need to talk about the details, but she said someone duped you out of $1 million and you shook their hand and you sort of, I'm not sure if you forgave them is the right term, but you kind of moved on. Can you talk about the mindset there? Look,
I'm not sure I forgave them, to be fair, but I guess there's some good in everybody, and there's always two sides to a story. And look, I could see some of their story, so I at least had to connect with that, and didn't agree with what happened, but I guess I at least viewed their position and gave it some credence.
The other part to it, which is really interesting, is you met Juzzy when you're like 15, 16 years old, so you've got she's obviously witnessed a long period of this Geoff Ross experience, for want of a better term.
Yeah, a long time, actually. As a slight sidebar, we had a band at Saatchi's called the Geoff Ross Experience, so that's the second time I've heard that term, because I was the worst guitar player in the band.
Well, we'll get to that. We're going to get to that, Geoff.
I think listening's really, really important. And met Jussie at high school between, I think it was Mrs. Parnell's form class and Mr. Howlett's physics class, and we crossed paths on a Monday and a Wednesday morning. So that's how that happened many, many years ago.
So for those that are this far and that don't know who Geoff Ross is, I'm going to read a very brief CV. Okay. You built 42 Below from a garage idea into a listed brand and sold it to Bacardi for $138 million. You then co-founded the business bakery, you floated Ecoya, you bought Trilogy for $20 million and exited via a $211 million sale. As chair of Moa Group, you led the pivot from brewing to hospitality, and you own and operate the incredible Lake Hawea Station, 6,500 hectares of New Zealand's first carbon zero farm. Which is quite a CV, but I read that because when I hear of someone who's lived a life like that, I always think, well, how the hell was this guy raised? Like, tell me how you became the man you are. And I want to start with your parents, and perhaps we can go with your dad first, because from everyone that I've spoken to, he is an exceptional man.
John and Lynette, mum and dad. So growing up in Paparemu, Happy Valley, which is only an hour south of here, but when we grew up there, it was a very, very rural, place. It was one gravel road going in. It's called Happy Valley, and it really was a happy valley. I think there must have been about 10 or 12 families. Somehow all the kids were about the same age. We all knew each other. It was the best upbringing in the world. So just a little two-classroom school. I'm still mates with a lot of as we all are, all of us who went to primary school there. It was a perfect upbringing.
Can you paint a little bit of a picture of your dad, John, and what sort of a man he is?
Yeah, well, look, he never sat my brother or my sister down and talked about entrepreneurialism or talked about business, but somehow those lessons came to us, I guess, quite early. Look, he started dairy farming, but he got into growing squash. He was one of the first deer farmers in our area in the North Island. At one point, we were the largest sweet corn grower in the Southern Hemisphere. So he was very entrepreneurial. He didn't ever say to us kids, go out and start a business, but somehow at the age of 11, I was trapping possums and skinning possums. In the winter, in the summer, I was catching live eels. and that was and my brother and sister were also doing similar things. So, and he was very proud of us for starting businesses at a young age, and very, very encouraging.
Freediver as well?
Yeah, he was one of two people, I think, who was the first certified scuba instructor in New Zealand, and that's down in Paparimu, south of Papakura. There weren't too many scuba divers in the late 60s. He was making his own scuba diving kit back then, and he's always been into freediving, got us into freediving. Has been manager of the New Zealand team for years and years, and he's now 84 and still freediving. Really well.
And you're still putting him on the tools down at Lake Hawea Station as well, aren't you?
He's coming down tomorrow, actually. Yeah, people love coming to the station because he gets a lot of work done.
So that's what we've heard, right? 84, he's still hunting, he's outpacing 20-year-olds. What have you learned from him as you've gotten older? Like, has the relationship with your dad changed? Are there lessons that you have learned through aging together?
I think... well, there's a Chinese saying, I think, house finish, man die. Dad's always got a project. He's always got a passion. At the moment, he's creating leather belts, and he's engraving buckles, like Western buckles. He saw Beth on Yellowstone. He's making a belt for Jussie at the moment, like Beth's from Yellowstone. So I think that momentum is a really important word, and Dad's shown me how important momentum is.
It's interesting because the way you speak about your father, your sons speak about you as well in terms of having a project, having something on the go. So it's interesting that trait seems to run through the bloodlines.
Yeah.
Is the first business, was it called Goat Busters?
Yeah, well, look, we had Goat Busters. So I was trapping possums when I was probably 10, 11. I had the cut-off drenched container on the back of the BMX bike. I had my 6 traps up around the hills, calling up farmers. Can I put some traps on your place? Did that, and
I love that you did the mobile phone signal as well. Which they weren't around then, were they?
They certainly weren't around. What would it be like? The cool lesson I learned there, I was thinking about this the other day, is that back then, Dalgetty's, the stock and station agent, would print in the newspaper the top possum skin prices, and I knew my average was, I think, $6.29 a skin or something like that. And they printed the lines of skins that went to auction, and they said top line $6.29. So at the age of 11, I used to look up to all these guys, these 20-something-year-old bushmen, were out trapping possums. They were my heroes, and I managed to kind of get an average skin price that was higher than them. So it kind of was my first lesson about premiumization, I think, and how you can actually get a bigger margin for the same thing. So, and coming in today, I kind of recalled that. But yeah, I was doing eels, and then goats was kind of one of those sectors that went through those kind of big boom and bust times, and so feral goats were being sold for about $200 each. So me and my dogs could go and catch some goats and sell them.
I want to just reference the name here, because when are we talking? Goat Busters, when was this business live?
Well, Goat Busters must have come out, whether it was 1 or 2, I can't quite remember.
The film Ghostbusters, right? Because I was thinking,
did you predate?
Well, I was thinking Goat Busters, does that predate Ghostbusters? Because the natural assumption would be the name is spun off the movie.
Certainly predates Roastbusters.
Yeah. No, I can't claim Goat Busters was pre-Ghostbusters.
Okay, so
Yeah. But I told my mates at high school, Papakarai, about how we're catching goats. They thought that was kind of fun. And me and a buddy had called it Goat Busters. So we made T-shirts, and that was our indoor cricket team. And we had a wee billy goat, so we brought him along to the indoor cricket games. And when we arrived, it was all, who are you going to call Goat Busters?
Yeah. All right, so I've got the timeline.
Yeah.
You introduced your mum briefly there, but I thought we should give some space for you to talk about your mum as well.
Yeah, well, Lynette. So in this amazing community, Mum, actually, I realised the other day, all the mums were active and busy and, raising families and working on farms. Mum did all of that, plus she worked. She was a teacher right up until retirement age. I think even beyond 65 she was teaching. She'd travel huge miles every day to a school in Maramarua or Pukekohe, to teach. She taught all around the county's district for decades.
I'm not sure if this is fair or accurate, but I'd heard that you didn't read, well, first of all, you didn't read a book until you were 13, and that you weren't, perhaps your parents didn't think of you as particularly sharp or bright until you had this leg break, and then you kind of like got stuck into your learning.
Couldn't do any goats, possums, or eels. So
No, it actually is. So this amazing place to grow up, Happy Valley, was a fantastic place, but the whole community would kind of meet in the school classroom, whether it would be a meeting on building a new pool or the meeting for the young farmers or whatever. The one meeting place was the classroom, and it listed how the students were all doing, So you're right, I was not doing that well at school. I couldn't spell to save myself. I recently learnt, or later in life I was dyslexic, which probably why I couldn't spell. So I was always at the bottom. I couldn't seem to get out of bronze up into silver or gold on the spelling. So there was, think about it now, this kind of perception. There's the bright kids who will go on to become builders and policemen and work at a bank and stuff like that. Then there's the thick kids who'll just go and milk cows. And I was in the thick kids. So I broke my leg first time skiing. I'd be on the ski field 5 minutes, broke my leg in 4 places. So I was laid up on the couch for about 6 months, and that's when I couldn't go outside. So I started to read, and thankfully with that and a teacher called Mr. Aiden, I remember him, who I guess had some confidence in me, gave me a bit of belief, and that I guess got me on the right track.
I think that'll be quite reassuring for some people to hear, because a lot of people will have kids and they might be struggling a little bit in school, or perhaps they're not doing particularly well, and then they see someone that's gone on to have the life and the career that you've had, and then you were at this place, and it sort of just came together, but it was a bit later than perhaps normal.
It was quite late, and it was only luckily it was probably just in time. Mr. Aiden and the reading kind of got me into a decent class at Papakura High School, and I was able to kind of move up from them. But it was kind of a junction, if I think of had gone into a probably poor, tough class at Papakura High, I may not have got out of that lane. But my mum, the teacher, she I've heard her give this advice many times to a lot of people over the years who have young children. And she said, there's only 2 things up until 13 that you really need to focus on, and they are they happy and are they reading? And if your children are reading and they're happy, everything else is going to be good.
Are you a big reader now?
Better, a lot better. Yeah, I read. Yeah, not a heap, not as much as I like, but I do read. Yeah, and I do love to keep stuff coming in to my brain. We'll talk about Saatchi's later, and there's one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with was at Saatchi's, and I asked him one day about, how do you come up with so many good ideas? And he just said, the more stuff you put in the brain, the more likelihood it's, some good stuff will come out.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, I love a guest that name checks their teachers that they came up through. There's just something about the respect element of that, because they've clearly had an influence in your life, that when you do recognise them all these years on, I feel like that's such a nice thing to do to people.
Yeah, you do. I think you do recall those pivotal moments at school and pivotal teachers, and Mr. Aiden was definitely one of them.
The other part, which is interesting in your upbringing, is a US exchange, I think, which comes during high school. Now, you've painted a pretty clear picture of a small rural town in New Zealand, and you've moved to Papakura High School, and then you find yourself on a plane and over in Washington State, I think it is, in the US?
Yeah, that's right. So Dad not only kind of taught us about entrepreneurialism, I think, kind of through osmosis, but he also, in a rural community, he also took us overseas as a family when we're about 12, or when I was about 12 or 13. We flew to Los Angeles, bought a 350 Chev camper van, and he said, righto, family, we're driving across the States and back, and it'll take us about 4 months. And so we did that as a family, and that was just unheard of in rural New Zealand, So he taught us that there's kind of almost, there's no boundaries, and that was another great lesson early on. But yes, I think I love that experience so much. I always wanted to go back to the US, so became a AFS student and did my last year of high school in Kettle Falls in Washington State.
Was it like it was in the movies, and you're prom king and you're playing?
I heard you might have been prom king.
Yes, I was prom king. I was one of the homecoming team, but I didn't quite make homecoming king. Yeah, but There was, it was an amazing year, actually. I had an amazing family way up in the mountains of close to the Canadian border of eastern Washington State. Beautiful place.
Culturally, was it very different, the host family that you went to compared to your family here in New Zealand?
Amazing family. Bill Rubright, he was a social worker, an ex-basketballer, 6'8", big. You look like Grizzly Adams, big beard. My host mum, gorgeous blonde woman, was the private secretary to Princess Grace for many years, and she was the French teacher at high school. And they'd built a kind of hexagonal cabin in the woods. They'd kind of gone off-grid. They had a son who became a host brother, and, we literally lived in the woods for a year.
When we get to 42 Below, I mean, you expanded out internationally. Do you think that year overseas in your teenage years helped with business?
Yeah, for sure. So not only, to answer your question, Seamus, yes, it was culturally quite different. The high school culture, I think, was very different. Maybe not so much from my point of view, but I think from the American students' point of view, they would say, wow, it must be really cool in New Zealand having zebras and stuff. And, and
they still say that now, though.
I realised that, the world doesn't know a lot about New Zealand. We're a pretty small country, relatively. But the other cool thing you do as an AFS student is every one weekend a month, you meet with the other AFS students. I was the only Kiwi. There was an Aussie boy about 2 hours drive away. But there was a lot of other students from all over the world, and we'd meet in one of our towns, get hosted in the towns, and have a weekend with, it was like the UN, a high school kind of UN. It was amazing. And I think that, yes, Steve, that certainly helped me later in business.
So you returned from America, and I've read that your mother sentenced you to 6 months of hell milking cows for a local farmer. Kind of got a bit of a taste for that. You started a Bachelor of Commerce degree at Lincoln, majoring in farm management. You wanted to be a deer farmer right up until about 2 weeks before you left Lincoln. Went on a field trip to Saatchi in Christchurch. So what happened on that field trip?
Well, look, I had been milking cows for 6 months. I did want to go farming. I realised probably the best pathway to owning my own deer farm was actually to milk cows and then become a share milker and then eventually buy a farm. That's a good pathway to buying a farm. But whilst everyone had said you'll get used to waking up and at 4:30 in the morning and milking cows, I don't think I ever did. And it was one morning when I got kind of shat on at about 6 in the morning that I thought maybe there's another way. So I went and did a BCom at Lincoln. But during a trip to Saatchi's Christchurch, I realised that I was about to go back into milking cows, and I saw this woman who took us around Saatchi's, and I started thinking, I think her week's going to look a little better than my week's going to look in a few months' time. I might talk to her about what she does. And she said, hey, do you get weekends off? And she goes, yeah, I get every weekend off. I thought, wow, okay, that's a tick. If I go dairy farming, I get one weekend off a month. I talked to her about how much she got paid. It was going to be 4 times more than I was going to be getting paid. So I thought, why don't I do that just for a couple of years, and then I can go back to farming. But kind of 12 years later, I was still in advertising.
Yeah, advertising, marketing, right? So sort of a decade learning the ropes. Was there a point where you realised you were quite good at it? And what does it mean to be good at marketing?
I don't know if there's a point that I realised I was good at it, but there's certainly many points I loved it. The first couple of years kind of making cups of tea and writing notes in meetings, I actually found pretty tough. It's quite a hard transition into the business world, I felt. But then I started I guess getting to work quite closely with the creative people in the agency. In the agency, there's kind of, back then, there's 3 groups. There's the suits. I was a suit, the client service people, the media folk who looked at all the, the media options, and the creative folk. And I realized that the kind of the magic and the power really of building a brand actually most often came from the creative folk. It was the power of their ideas which could do quite amazing things for a brand. So I started getting closer and closer to creative people, and I think because of that, a lot of creative people then advocated to work with me, and that helped my career in advertising.
Did you cross paths with Kevin Roberts at all?
A little bit. He was our big boss at Saatchi's. Yeah. I didn't really kind of spend much time with Kevin.
He came to he did a lunchtime talk at University of Waikato where I was at, and it was like, it changed me when I heard him speak. He talked about finding what you love and then find a way to make money out of it. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And it's the parallels between that and going into that office in Christchurch and realizing, hey, this is something that I want to do is interesting. Really, really interesting.
Another friend of my father's actually, who I met in Papakura, who ran a racehorse training place, and I'd work for him in the holidays, kind of planting trees and things like that. And he said once to me, his name was Ray Wallace, and he had a really gruff, stern voice. He said exactly that. He said, doesn't matter what you do, just do it bloody well and you'll be a success. I don't care if you run a rubbish bin, company. If you do that bloody well and you like that, you'll be a huge success. Yeah, so there's some truth in it.
So did you like advertising?
Loved it. Yeah, loved it. Still love it in many ways. But that industry, has changed hugely in the last 10 years, as you guys know.
I spoke to your son Finn, and he's planted a few stories, and I'm not really sure. I don't have much context other than what he said. But is there a teacup in the wall story from Saatchi?
Yeah, look, whilst I did get on really well with the creative people in the most part, I do remember as I got older and a bit more confident, I would, at times perhaps stand up to some debates that we're having internally. And there's a chap called Len Cheeseman, an amazing typographer. He is and still is, a true genius with type. But I was arguing with him over the type on a lotto poster because I ran a lotto account. And lotto posters needed to be big and loud. The super draw this week, 3 million, And Len had created some beautiful type. And I was telling him, Len, it's beautiful type, but no one can read it. And he was saying, of course they can read it. And anyway, things escalated, and somehow his teacup was thrown into the wall. But I think he was quite proud of it because he put my name under it and the date, and the teacup stayed in the wall for many years.
Physically stuck in the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Must have been some small font.
As you're starting to sort of like climb the ladder at Saatchi, was there a desire in you to build something of your own?
There was, yeah. So the observation started, however, coming. I had a couple of friends in investment banking and other businesses, and they talked to me about how businesses were valued. And they started talking to me about what we now call today, in modern jargon, as body shops. Businesses that to scale up, the only way you can scale up is get more people. And those businesses typically aren't valued as highly as a brand that can scale up, without adding heaps more cost. So I started thinking about what we did in advertising, and actually we were creating ideas that, we would get paid for, but the real people making money were the owners of the brands, in similar connection to what my mates in investment banking were saying. So I realized that to grow real wealth, you actually need to own a brand, so that was observation one. I guess observation two was, what's that going to be? What's my skill set? It's probably in consumer branding. So, the antenna kind of started going up, and, what opportunities are there potentially for me to start a brand?
I was thinking about how best to get into the 42 Below story, and as I was reading the book, I was like, well, it's right here. So I'm actually going to read an excerpt from Every Bastard Says No. So Juzzy writes, am I saying that right, Juzzy?
Jussie, yeah,
Jussie.
Short for Justine, and she did write the book. I had very little to do with the book.
It's a beautifully written book.
All credit needs to go to her for the book.
So on a flight, an advertisement in the airline magazine caught his attention. It was for an American vodka called Sky, and the ad was weird. So he did what all well-schooled ad men do and explored his feelings. Feeling 1, this is weird. I cannot skip the page. Feeling 2, vodka from America? America isn't clean, it's soiled and industrial. America makes bourbon in those fields in Kentucky. Vodka should come from cool, pristine Eastern European places like Sweden or Finland or Russia, shouldn't it? But what is probably more important than the country is the environment. Yeah, cool, natural, pristine environments feel right for the origin of vodka, whether they're in Sweden or somewhere else, somewhere like New Zealand. Bingo. Feeling 3, there's a new company making vodka. They must sniff a growth market here. That's supported by my experience with demand and supply of a tasty drink made with vodka, cranberry and grapefruit called Sea Breeze. One of our party friends in Wellington had taken to making jugs of this concoction for every get-together. Feeling 4. Yep, cocktail culture might just be on the comeback. It's probably time. Feeling 5. New Zealand has opened beverage doors around the world with its wine. Maybe some of the Kiwi heavy lifting has been done. Surely it would be simple to piggyback with vodka. Feeling 6. Maybe I'm not in love with advertising anymore. And Juzzy writes that from the moment she said yes, every bastard then said no. But I'm kind of interested in, after that flight, how the wheels started turning.
Yeah, well, that's a really accurate description. The observations were keen to get into our own brand. Observation was cocktail culture is growing. Observation was that wine was a brand. It was from New Zealand, was starting to go out to the world. We naively thought, let's just put some vodka cases in the back of all those containers of wine. The pipe's already open. We'll just piggyback on that. And actually, that naivety or that purity of thought is actually quite, I think, really powerful. It's Nashi and I will talk about him maybe later. We talk about the first breakout album of bands versus what they call the difficult second album.
Yeah.
The difficult second album is often difficult because it's overproduced and people are trying to second guess and people become cynical and skeptical and all those types of things. But when you've got that naivety and that purity of thought, that's possibly when your ideas are, at their strongest, and that's what happened in that case.
So the flight lands.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
I'd literally, as back from LA, I did not stop writing the whole way home, so kind of wrote the business plan in that 12-hour flight. Saw Jussie, what do you think? And she just said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And started from there.
And are you a home brewer by nature?
No,
or?
not at all. And I didn't take chemistry at high school, so it was a pretty steep learning curve for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so from the outside, before knowing the story, I had assumed that, you had a bit of a background and you had a bit of an eye in. But then I sort of read, you had to answer all these questions. What is it made from? How's it made? What actually is alcohol? How long does it take to make? What does a still work? What is the shelf life? What will it cost? How do you sell it? Who distributes it? Who producers expect to make as a margin? What do retailers expect to make as a margin? Who are the competitors? Like, you've got to ask these questions and then figure them all out, right, from the ground up.
Yeah, exactly that. And that was kind of pre the internet, actually. So research was hard and slow and took a lot of phone calls from a lot of people that actually didn't know a lot. So, yeah, it took a lot of digging.
And the myth is that you ran a still in your garage and nearly blew the garage up?
Yes, found a still in Manurewa, of all places, flew it home, started distilling. You make your whey first, which is all the fermented grains, had an electric blanket wrapped around that because the trick is consistency and temperature. So I had that in the kitchen, and then when that gets to
in
a
the
certain...
kitchen?
In the
Such a Kiwi story.
Put that in the still had it in the garage. Distilling is something you don't want to rush. It's a very gentle, slow process because you want to capture that. They call the head, the heart, and the tail of a distillation. So you're heating a liquid, basically, turning it into a steam. That steam will rise, and then as it falls down a condenser, it turns into liquid. The first liquid is the head. You want to discard that. The heart is what you want to keep, and the tail you want to discard. But you want to do that slowly so you can quite accurately it's like a drafting gate on the farm, so you can draft out, the baddies and keep the goodies. But if you rush that, you get too many of the baddies in it, and also you can potentially have an explosion, But it takes about 8 hours, or it's taking me about 8 hours. So I'd start it when I get home from work at night at about 6 or 7 at night. And then by the wee hours, you're starting to get quite tired. And I fell asleep and luckily woke up, ran downstairs, and the sides of the still were like this, they were close to going.
See, I didn't realise you were still running your job and doing this on the side, like any great entrepreneur story of when they start. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, for quite a while actually, and it was a real conflict. 1 week I'd be in love with advertising and say I've got to stay in advertising, I love it. Next week I'd say actually I'm not sure this sector's going to last. I'm not sure working for selling your ideas to a whole lot of other people to get wealthy from is a good idea. Kind of oscillate between the two for a long time. Some people look at 42 Below and say it was a bit of a overnight success, but it was a kind of, as the entrepreneurs say, it was a 10-year overnight success. So there was a lot of years kind of working on it.
What was the tipping point to say I'm all in on 42 Below now?
I think probably meeting Grant, one of the investors. There's a moment Grant talks about it. One of my clients at Saatchi's was Whittaker chocolate. I pitched for it, got it. Love the Whittaker guys, love their business model. And then they had a good share of New Zealand chocolates, sending a bit overseas. And I thought I want to do the same, but in vodka. So I kind of articulated that vision to Grant, and Grant just paused for a moment and said, I think you need a bigger goal. And luckily, he backed it, put some money in it, and that allowed us to go full on.
Of the 10-year overnight success, like how would you characterize the early years? Were you facing a lot of resistance? People are saying no to you. People are questioning whether it's what you should be spending your time with. Like, did it start? Like, when did it actually start to sort of get a bit of momentum?
I think a lot of people were questioning it, but I think the person who shouldn't have been questioning it was me. I think if people often say any regrets, with 42 Below, and I go, yeah, I should have gone harder, faster, sooner, and should have had that confidence to really put the foot down from day one. And as I mentioned, I was oscillating between staying in advertising, and then I was thinking maybe this other business might be a better goer. And I think that lack of belief was a big delay on that business, and I wish I'd gone earlier, because by the time we got to the States, Grey Goose, Belvedere, a lot of other brands were kind of entering at the same time. We could have actually beaten them to market if I had have gone a bit earlier.
One of the real keys to the success is marketing, and one of my favorite chapters in the book was it's called I Hate Marketing, and I want to read the 11 sort of bullet points that you've written, and then we can sort of talk about some of the ones you think are most important. So number 1, culture leads everything. Your culture needs to know what its fight is. 2, brands need real roots and real credentials. 3, listen to everyone, but be prepared to ignore what you don't like. 4, at all costs get noticed, be heard, stand for something. 5, word of mouth is the most powerful medium in the world. 6, PR builds brands, advertising maintains them. 7, sales is marketing, marketing is sales. 8, the power of opposites, anti-cyclical thinking. 9, pitch it high, sell it wide. Positioning is different from distribution. 10, brands have stretch. 11, ready, fire, aim. Which one stands out when I read those back to you? Are there any that jump out to you as more important than others?
Goodness, I haven't read that list for a long time. I think now I wish I had read it more recently. I think it's still a pretty good list, actually. I can't see one there that really stands out.
What does brands have stretch mean?
Okay, brand managers get far too precious with their brand. Often they think, we can only kind of talk about it in this way, we can only price it in this way, we can only package it in this way. They put it in a straitjacket. Brands actually are like people. They can be far more flexible than that.
Okay, let's ask about all of these, because I think you're going to have good answers for each of them.
Can I start with one? Because when 42 Below was coming out, that was when I was first coming into my drinking years, my real drinking years, when I was legal. And I just remember it being everywhere, which I think links to point 4, at all costs get noticed, be heard, stand for something. Like, from my recollection of it was 42 Below was everywhere, and marketing stunts, and is that what you were talking about? Is just making noise?
That was definitely part of it, and thankfully I had a great mate from advertising called Daryl Parsons, who's a genius at that. But no, it's a lot more than that. Like, brands need substance and noise, and they need roots, credentials, a reason for being. If we were just a noisy maverick brand, which we were a maverick brand, but without a real story, without good quality, without a reason for being, I don't think we would have succeeded.
Culture leads everything. Your culture needs to know what its fight is.
Yeah. I think a common fight is actually really galvanizing and puts everyone in the same direction. We were tiny, and we were facing brands like Absolute or big distribution groups like Lion, and if we got a small win, I remember the day we got Soul Bar actually here in the viaduct. That was, I think it was a Finlandia or an Absolute account, and we just could not get in, But somehow we got one bottle in there, and the sales guy came back and said, "Hey, we got Soul just bought a bottle," and we just that had very little consequence to the business really, but we viewed that as belief. That was a signal that we could take on Absolute and win, and so we kind of, celebrated those.
I've got Wolf of Wall Street vibes in my mind about the celebrations in the office and what those look like, but maybe that's off. Maybe that's
no,
off
we
the mark.
did. Well, a woman worked with us called Anna, had a pet sheep called Monty, and somehow whenever we got a win like that, we called a Monty, which was everyone having a shot, and as we started growing around the world, someone would get a win in London that was 9 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand, so we'd all have a Monty, and what that did to our culture is not only did it help belief, but it made you want to be the one who called the Monty. You wanted to get back to that office and say, "I just got this," we're calling a Monty. So it was good. It was a good little signal.
Listen to everyone, but be prepared to ignore what you don't like. I find this interesting.
Yeah, so there's a fine line between arrogance, and belief as well. So you should never be arrogant. You've got to listen to everybody. But you do have to realize that some people don't have the vision. They don't lie awake at night that you do. They haven't seen all the things that you've seen in your mind. So they might advise you differently because you haven't, they're not seeing all the kind of opportunities and signals that you're seeing. So by all means listen. We should always listen. But at the end of the day, kind of believe in what your gut's telling you.
This one I can speak to because it's how the podcast has grown. Word of mouth is the most powerful medium, and nothing is more powerful than a friend or someone whose opinion you trust recommending something, right?
100%, yeah. There's a saying from advertising, a brand's not a brand until you've experienced it, like 7 times for some reason. You may have seen it in a magazine, you may have heard about it in a shop. A dealer in a showroom may have talked about it, a friend may have talked about it. But the biggest component of that is word of mouth, by all means.
Is that where those viral, we'd call them viral videos now, but this was pre-YouTube. This is when you were attaching videos to emails and forwarding them to people, and they were forwarding them on?
MPEGs.
Yeah.
MPEGs. Daryl was a genius at these. We created a little MPEG. Actually, they started as radio ads. We got some free radio time somehow. I don't know how. So Daryl wrote some radio ads. And then a week later, he said, "I think we can put some images to these," and made an MPEG, and we'd release them at night, before we left to go home. Come back into work the following morning and see how many views they'd had, and sometimes it'd just be millions and millions the following morning.
So cool.
The power of opposites, anti-cyclical thinking.
Yeah, Karen Walker actually introduced this concept. She was on the 42 Below board, and she talked about it's so hard, to be fresh and to be new. So where do you go for fresh, innovative, interesting thinking that's going to cut through? A good place to start is actually thinking about the opposites, So in her world, if everyone's going, I don't know, into pinks or into florals or into pinstripes or whatever, what's the opposite of that? And that's often going to get you cut through and kind of a fresh audience.
Man, I'm sorry to relate it back to us again, but I remember we've been doing the podcast sort of 6 years, and I remember quite early, I got some advice that, everyone's doing sort of 30 or 40 minute podcasts, it should be that sort of size because it's a more enjoyable experience for the listener. And I was like, no, I want to do our 2 hour ones.
2 hour 40, that's where it's at. That's where it's really at.
Yeah. Ready, fire, aim.
I think that's actually a Kevin Roberts-ism. There's so many brands that kind of try and perfect the business plan or perfect the comms plan, and they start tinkering with it, forever and ever and ever. And the truth is, there's never the perfect business plan, So I think we say in the book, marketing's like one of those missiles. Just get it in the air, and then you can direct it, But if it's on the ground and you're kind of tinkering with it for forever, it's never going to do any good, So I guess another way of saying just start. Yeah.
So these are good. Pitch it high, sell it wide. Positioning is different from distribution.
I think that's the Gucci analogy. They sell $10,000 dresses. they kind of put $10,000 dresses on the runway, but actually where they make all their money is in t-shirts and sunglasses, So it's build your brand. Mercedes are great at doing it. Build your brand way up here, even if though you're selling, four-door grey sedans, by mass down there, So it just helps keep your brand high.
And last one, I think, sales is marketing and marketing is sales.
Yeah. It's putting your brand on a shelf is a form of marketing. Selling is, you've got to have salespeople that get out there and put your brand on the shelf. That's doing a job for building the brand. And if brand builders are good, they should move product as well. It should create demand. So that, I know they're kind of different on the one hand, but they've got to work pretty well together.
I know you haven't heard these in a while, and I don't want to skip too far in the story, but are these just ingrained principles in you now? Like, you've rattled off what they mean to us as we've peppered them at you, but are they just part of your way of thinking?
I'm actually thinking they should be I haven't heard those for a long time. I think I need to revisit them. I think they're still pretty strong, actually, and still quite relevant.
They stand up.
Yeah. They definitely stand up for us in the podcast world.
It's so related, like it's so good. So to continue the sort of the 42 Below story, I want you to talk about the importance of the collective, because we had described that you were the accelerator, Steve Sinclair was the brakes, and Grant Baker was the steering wheel, and the importance of how these things are only built by teams and how that sort of operated.
That's very true. Look, I don't think 42 Below would have been anywhere near what it was without those skill set of particularly Grant and Steve, but many others. We had Jacob Bryars, the vodka professor. We had some great in-market sales people like Justin Baden in London. So we had an amazing team. And look, I was never a great rugby player, but I think the best game of rugby I ever played was when I trialled for this really good senior Prem team. And I played the best game of rugby in my life. I didn't make the team, but I played the best game of rugby in my life because I was surrounded by some really, really sharp players, and the pace of the game was much quicker and the skill level was much better. And so it just pulled me up, So I figure if you put yourself in a really, really good team, they're gonna pull you up. And that's definitely what happened, at 42 Below. And yeah, Steve was kind of the brake, which frustrated the hell out of me at times. But in hindsight, it was a really valuable skill set. He stopped us from, falling into a few traps for sure.
Seamus is our break.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested in that because I was going to say conflict, but it's not conflict. It's almost tension within those working partnerships, but they're almost necessary to be successful.
As a healthy tension, and it worked. And the great thing about 3 is if there is a disagreement, Grant would kind of step in and make a call.
Steering wheel.
Yeah.
But so you're investing all of the money back into the company, right? So what part during this sort of decade, how far into the 42 Below story are you starting to think we're on to a winner here? It's just about sort of how big it gets, or I'm sort of we're set up here. Like, at what part of the timeline was that?
I think outwardly I was always projecting, especially to the team, we're doing it, we're having wins, we're on our way. I think inwardly there's always a wee bit of me saying, I'm not sure how big we're going to get this thing. Look, there's some great trigger moments. We got invited by the Ritz Hotel to be the Centennial Cocktail. We started seeing it. I'll tell you one cool moment. I was just on a sales trip in London, walking home after a day on the street selling 42 Below, and I saw this, what was obviously a really cool bar. It was like 1 a.m, and I thought, why don't I just go down? I probably can't make a sales call, but I'll at least get an address, maybe meet someone, and we can come back and do a sales call. And I walked down, it was a basement bar, and there on the back bar was 42 Below. It had already found its way there. So there was little signals like that were pretty cool.
Did you sell a few bottles to Steven Spielberg?
We did get some bottles to Steven Spielberg. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I don't know how we got them.
Well, did he send a cease and desist to not use my name and likeness with 42 Below marketing as well?
That was Russell Crowe.
I always get my celebrities. I always get my 42 Below celebrities mixed up. Really?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Right at the end of one of Daryl's MPEGs, it had made right here in Sydney, New Zealand by Russell Crowe. And we got a picture of Russell Crowe holding his Oscar. And, of course, we took out the Oscar and put in a bottle of 42 Below. So, yeah, we got a letter from Russell's lawyers. And so we did actually we didn't always yield to complaints like that. We did yield to that one. And we sent the Quinella Sharks, which I think Russell owned, a case of vodka and said,
Sydney
thanks,
Roosters.
guys.
Sydney Rabbitohs.
Rabbitohs.
Sorry, Russell. Got that wrong.
Yeah, there's two. Yeah.
Well, one of the parts I enjoyed in the book is how you took it international, and you spoke about, you kind of had to sell it 3 times, I think. It was like to the distributor and then to the bars and then to the customers.
Yeah.
And it's like you're sending people kind of like, attractive 30-year-olds to go and kind of like schmooze the barkeeps to stock your...
Barkeep? I haven't had barkeeps for so long.
For Labour Weekend tournament. Sorry, in joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, like... Was that a fun way of problem solving and trying to like figure out all the different elements of it and taking it international?
Well, it was trying to manage both the push and the pull that's required in marketing. So we saw a lot of brands were quite good at the push. They were saying, hey, distributor, you need to buy, so many pallets of vodka because it's going to do this, this, and this, and here's our marketing deck, and isn't it cool? But meanwhile, out on the street, nothing's happening, and there's no kind of consumer connection to that brand. So we started from the consumer end, started from the pull end. We knew that bartenders or mixologists and barkeeps, I'm sure, were really important. So
did you create the term mixologist, or was that always around?
I think it was around, but our vodka professor, Jacob, he kind of, elevated that. In fact, we called him the vodka professor because he could give degrees in mixology, and we kind of gave it a bit more seriousness, I guess, to that craft. And so we got them talking about it. So we knew that when a distributor would come into a bar and say, hey, Seamus, I've got these 5 different vodkas, there's this one, this one, this one. If that mixologist had already heard about 42 Below, that the word of mouth had spread, they'd had someone, a cool, like-minded, person in their bar talking about a vodka cocktail they could make, they were going to choose our one, because, that's an experience I'd already had with it.
And you'd send punters in. You'd send your friends in to ask, hey, have you got any 42 Below?
That's good. That's good.
we did, yeah. So if getting a bottle in is only part of the job. You got to then get it moving, So if we got a bottle into a really key account, we couldn't obviously do it to all accounts, but we knew we had to get that bottle moving quite quick. So we'd send friends in to say, order it, call it by name, start raving about it, start telling the bartenders about it, give the story, and we'd say, yeah, you're not only, to our salespeople, you're not only selling, a product, you're selling the story. You've got to understand who you're selling to. It's got to understand the purity of the water, the amount of times it's been distilled, the highest purity rating possible for the vodka, the amount of awards it's won, all that kind of stuff. Get those stories out there.
So the next step is listing, right? Going on the NZX, which... how do you reflect on that? Was that the right time? Was it too soon? Was it too late?
At that time, and in hindsight, it was the right time. So it was Grant's idea. Grant came in one day. Look, we were small, we were loss-making. I was barely keeping up with this small little growth business as it was and trying to keep that under control. And Grant said we should list, and I thought he was crazy, But, it was a time... It was, 03, 04, we'd seen, fashion brands like Karen Walker, start to get kind of traction on the global stage. We'd seen our wine brands start to get traction on the wine stage. I think Lord of the Rings was coming out around then. So we had this belief and confidence that no longer could we just, create some milk powder and a few logs or something. We actually could have some quite cool brands. What was great about that time is that New Zealanders were proud of the cool brands. And so it was a time when I don't think I've ever been prouder of our country. And so we started hearing about New Zealanders saying, I'm going to London, I've got some mates, I'm going to take them a bottle of 42 Below because that's a really cool New Zealand thing, and it shows we're not just about, some old, lamb chop. We can actually do something really cool. And it's a cool brand, and it looks good, and it'll make them think good things about New Zealand. So we had these ambassadors, or these, kind of spokespeople for our brand, and we saw that kind of happening. So we thought, well, maybe those people not only want to represent our brand, maybe they might want to be owners of that brand. And so that's kind of what gave us the confidence to list. But it was, I don't know that I'd do it again at that time. We were lucky with timing. Listed markets now are tough, especially for small brands. They shouldn't be, but they are in this country at the moment.
So you list, I think you raised 15 million, right? Raised a $60 million valuation. And this came with a whole lot of commentary from the media and those in the sort of financial industries about it being sort of overhyped and overpriced, and then the shares dropped, I think, on day one. So you've encouraged all your family and friends, like you say, to support it and get behind it. And then what's that like with that whole swirling of everyone's talking about it, it's starting to drop? Like, are you feeling stress and pressure and all of these things?
All of those things, yeah. And you're exactly right. We talked to family members. My Auntie Jean, my aging Auntie Jean had put money in, so there's huge responsibility. And, the commentators absolutely smashed us. There's headlines in the paper, basically telling people this is exactly what New Zealand capital markets don't need. This is going to undermine the whole kind of New Zealand Stock Exchange. Luckily, Mark Weldon was the new CEO of the Stock Exchange. He'd seen bottles of vodka in New York being put on tables for $400 each. He got brand, he understood brand, and he, I think we listed, soon after he joined. Luckily, he didn't buckle, and he actually, stood for us, as did all our customers or consumers who are proud of this brand, even though the financial markets were panning us. And I think the day after listing, walked out to the mailbox at 6 a.m, got the paper and the headline. We sunk, I think, to listed at 50 cents, but we dropped to like 42 cents. So of course the journalists couldn't help themselves. 42 below. So it was a tough start for sure.
I love the part in the story about our I think the biggest sort of private investor was a friend of yours, and when it started to turn and come back the other way, it's because you found out that he'd taken a mortgage out on his house in order to invest another couple of $100,000, and then the momentum started coming the other way.
That's exactly right. Really ballsy call, but amazing.
Paid off, eh?
One other comment about that time. Look, we did get panned by the financial media and kind of the institutions, but it was never personal, and at some stage we might talk about other tough experiences in life where they were personal, which is at a time when I was disappointed at being, at fellow New Zealanders. So even though I was kind of being panned by the institutions, I kind of knew they were always going to give this young upstart a tough time, and I didn't mind it so much really, because it kind of wasn't personal. It was always about the business, and people can have an opinion about a business. That's absolutely fine. When it gets personal, maybe that's sometimes, taking things too far.
The other interesting, there's lots of interesting points, is you bring on sort of prominent board members, Grant Dalton and Karen Walker, who we've mentioned. What was the thinking behind getting them involved?
I guess, Zig when the other zag, a Saatchiism. We didn't want to be a stodgy kind of, typical, I guess, public company. We knew we needed to grow. We needed to grow fast. We needed people that would challenge us, that would stand up to us, question us. Grant had met Grant Dalton before, thought he was he was an accountant by trade, pretty no nonsense, no bullshit kind of guy. We thought that's a good, it's going to push us. That's going to be a good influence on the board. And I'd met Karen Walker before. I wanted someone who understood design, popular culture, the importance of aesthetic, what was going on in kind of new emerging, scenes around the world. I wanted kind of that worldliness. So I advocated for Karen, and we went from there.
Yeah, it continues to grow. The momentum shifts back, and you diversify, and you do gins and
was it
rums
South
and-
Gin?
South Gin.
Yeah.
It was a really good gin. I've
Was
still
there a
got
hedgehog or something on the...
there's like a really cool kind of botanical garden scene. It was
Yeah.
many. It's still a great scene and still a great package, actually. Yeah.
And then, to sort of move towards the end of the timeline, it's Bacardi come knocking. And I want to read what Juzzy said about this. She said, I think one of the most extraordinary examples of Geoff's ability to get things done was the deal with Bacardi. And there were 7 or 8 lawyers on their side and 2 on our side. In the end, Geoff and the main man from Bacardi stood up and said, listen, let's leave the room and let's get a deal done. And they did it, and it was done on a handshake instead of all the posturing and trickiness. He's just brilliant at that. Like, that fascinates me. The art of negotiation, first of all, like $138 million deal sort of done on a handshake. But can you take us inside the room there and what's going on?
Yeah, that's how it happens. So these things go on for months. You know, there's all sorts of DD research. You open up what they call kind of a document room. You're sharing everything, and then a price range is set, and then kind of the real discussion starts to happen once they've gone through all the DD of the actual price, and we'd set a deadline for the deal, if we're going to do it, to be announced on a Tuesday. I'm not sure why we set a Tuesday.
Slow news day.
Must be. Could be a Tuesday morning. And we're kind of getting nowhere. And the more lawyers and the more accountants and the more kind of business valuation you got involved, everything was just slowing down. So it was a Sunday. We're at the lawyers. We're in the big boardroom on a Sunday here in town. And I just realised we were getting nowhere, and everyone was kind of justifying their position or justifying why on page 37 they wrote something, So a lovely, super intelligent man from Bacardi called Atul Vora was obviously the lead on their side. So at coffee break, I said, Atul, can we have a discussion? And we cut to it and, shook hands in 5 minutes. And I think we got a great deal, and I think they did as well. It was, it was work for both of us.
Do you remember the way that you felt? And, this is a big moment. Were you confident? Because you weren't the best negotiator in your team from what you'd written in the book. So here's, Grant couldn't be there, and so you've got to step up and just get it done. Was there trepidation?
A huge amount, yeah, and you're right. Grant was typically the big conversation deal. I'm sometimes, conflict adverse. Grant handles, he's got the steely blue kind of...
You were described as Gandhi to me by Grant in terms of... Yeah.
Well, Grant would often do he'd be the bad guy, he'd do the tough stuff. But no, he wasn't well at the time. And look, it was just a time where, some decisions had to be made. And yeah, it was quite an emotional time actually after that, because it was become such a big part of your life for such a long time, and then you realise, my goodness, it's that kind of thing that almost defined you for a decade is going.
That's what I wanted to ask. You shake hands on a $138 million deal, and you walk out of the room, and you pick the phone up, and I'm not sure who you call, but that's got to be a wild time.
It was wild, yeah.
And then how quickly after the handshake do you stay for a handover period?
Yeah, well, they typically, Bacardi had bought a lot of companies, and they typically don't surprisingly have handcuffs on the founder. In fact, they kind of often like the founder to go so they can get on and do their own stuff and not have the founder kind of do it in their way. So they didn't have any kind of handcuffs on me. I stayed for about 6 months. But look, I just realised it wasn't for me. And, we say, I think also in the book, it was like sending your kid on to university. And there's a time you got to let go. And so I realised it was theirs now, and it was their time.
And one of the people who stayed on, I think, for another 4 years with Bacardi was Dion Nash, who's the next voice that Stephen's going to introduce to the conversation.
Yeah, we've got a little Dion Nash segment before we move to post 42 Life. So Dion Nash says, First of all, probably the best boss I've worked for. I don't think he probably realizes this, but Geoff has this ability to build you up and really instill confidence in you, so much so that you don't want to let him down. It's a special combination of qualities. I found myself really wanting to impress him. Not every boss, I would say, has had that impact on me. He gave you license to make mistakes. He'd give you enough rope to hang yourself, but he'd never let you hang yourself. One of his skills is you can walk into his office with a really shit idea, but one that you're invested in and you feel it's great. And he'll hear you out. Then at the end of it, instead of saying, mate, that's the shittest idea I've ever heard, he'll just say something like, listen, that sounds great, Dion, but have you thought about it like this? And then he'll just take you on this journey that leads you down the road and you realize, oh, fuck, of course, this is such a bad idea. I want to sort of pause on that. Is that just experience, that sort of man management side of things? Are you aware you're doing that?
Not really aware, no. I think maybe, again, to give some, thanks to my time at Saatchi's, you had the creative process and creative thinking, and you had business requirements, and sometimes you had to match the two, and sometimes on the outside of it they seemed a million miles apart. But if you can kind of see some connection points between the power of a really strong creative idea and a business objective and put them together, that can be really useful. But you've got to do a lot of listening on both sides to kind of be able to do that. So I think I have a lot to owe to Saatchi's for that skill, if that exists.
There's a real skill as well about keeping someone's mana, for want of a better term, when you are diverting them away from their idea and kind of, I don't know, influencing it in some way. That's essentially what Dion was trying to get across, that never felt torpedoed at all by your advice or your wisdom, which maybe speaks to what Reeve was talking about as well at the very top.
And I guess maybe also that great ideas can come from everywhere, and I really believe that. And so even within a shit idea, there's probably a good idea there, or in kind of two steps on from that, there could be a really good idea. So you should never kind of, trash or kind of shoot something down, because kind of just right around the corner, that could lead to lead to something brilliant.
It's sort of like being a guitarist in a band. You might not necessarily land the song first time around, but somewhere down the line there's something good.
Shay's preempting Dion's second point. So he writes, secondly, he's the world's shittest guitarist. And I say that as the other guitarist in the band, called the Camel Toes. We're told by Juzzy it's actually just now called the Toes, not a family-friendly band. Geoff got us a gig through his network at the 50-year anniversary of the Beatles, playing at the Town Hall in Auckland. All we had to do was learn 3 Beatles songs. It takes us 3 months to learn these 3 songs. We've got Hamish from the Feelers as a bass guitarist. I've got another keyboardist, and all of a sudden there's this whole thing happening. He bought this fancy Grish guitar, one of the Beatles used or something, but he couldn't keep the G string in tune. So he was just forever tuning this guitar. It was like, oh, for fuck's sake, mate, just get another guitar. Buy $100 one that stays in tune. Anyway, we turn up on the night, and it's Neil Finn and Tim Finn. There's Hello Sailor. It's like every New Zealand band you can think of over the last 50 years has got some sort of presence there. We're like, hey, we're the Camel Toes here for sound check. And this lady's going, nah, you guys aren't on the list. And I was like, we've been practicing for 3 months. She's like, there's definitely no band called the Camel Toes. And then we go, look, we're on the poster. But when we look up at the poster, it says the Geoff Ross Experience. He's renamed the band Geoff Ross Experience. So there was friction and ructions caused on the night, a shit ton, and it was hard to come back from. So ask him about the Geoff Ross Experience and how the rest of the Camel Toes feel about it.
Well, what can I say? If the promoters want to put my name on it, and not Nash's, what can I do? I don't know how that happened. I think probably is more about they couldn't print the Camel Toes on a poster than anything else. And because I think it was my wife who was part of the Play It Strange charity that put that gig on, and she kind of connected us to it. They somehow put my name on it. So that's my story anyway.
But music's been a big part of your life and continues to be a big part of your life as well.
Look, a little bit. And whilst I'm a shit guitar player, I reckon I'm better than Nashi anyway. and his kind of Gibson Les Paul is, it's all for show, that thing. It might be a slick guitar, but he can't play it. No, he is actually a pretty good guitarist. I learnt guitar. at primary school and a bit at high school, and and as I think it's Bono says, all you need is 3 chords and a dream, and it's handy to be able to play a few chords from time to time.
You still pull it out at the fire pit down on the station and strum a few tunes?
A little bit, yeah. My boys both are pretty good on guitar, and Gabe can sing pretty well as well. Yeah.
You had a little band experience as well, didn't you, Steve?
Funnily enough, I used to be in a band called the Booby Lickers, and we shortened it to the Blickers.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's
Same thing. Yeah.
That town hall gig, like we had Dion Nash, obviously, and Craig Innes, 2 obviously high-profile sporting people. And after that, after we got through the nerves and the adrenaline of it all, both of them said, Nashy's played at Lord's, Craig's played at Eden Park or Wembley when he was playing league. They both said that was the most kind of adrenaline-fueled kind of high they have ever experienced.
Yeah, sounds like it was a long way from the practice gig in Taupo on the way down to Masterton, which is another story that Nashi gave us.
That's right. Yeah, we played to 9 very scared German backpackers
who all left the pub.
They did. Yeah, and we had our manager for about kind of 24 hours. He resigned after that gig. Then our following manager, he resigned the following day, so he forgot our name when he introduced us. So in Masterton, so
forgot the Geoff Ross experience. All right, and the last one from Nashi is when he's in a meeting with a whole bunch of people and some guy is rambling on. His way of getting to the point is saying, "Point cunt." And because he's quite a softly spoken guy, when you first hear it, you're like, sorry, what? What did I just hear? He'd be sitting in these high-powered meetings in a circle of management, and as you're rambling, you'd get point cunt. It tells you a bit about him. Yes, he's softly spoken and he's creative and all that, but deep down at the heart of it, there's a killer businessman in there. And the point of that story is we're all here on the clock. Don't waste people's time. Get to the gist or fuck off. And there's a little bit of that, I think, that surprises a few people when it happens with someone like Geoff, because they think he's a lovely guy, a nice guy and all that, and he is, but he's also a businessman at the end of the day.
Yeah, I first heard that saying, I didn't invent it myself, actually, from a couple of Kiwi guys who had started a great little ad agency in Sydney, Tim and Ollie, and Ollie called it out to his business partner, Tim, one day in a meeting in front of us. I think a more polite way of saying it is, land the plane, which is perhaps what I say today. I think also I don't mind people if they're kind of talking passionately about an idea, and sometimes that goes on a lot longer than it perhaps could have. But what I hate is when people kind of start talking up their own book and they're actually not talking about the idea. They're actually trying to kind of talk about themselves and their own credentials. And I guess you develop, as you get older, a nose for that. And, that's perhaps when the point comment comes out.
Land the plane is good.
What I can guarantee is that is going to become a staple in between two beers.
In our office.
I'm going to say it the shave every day, I think.
Well, waffle copter is my one, because I know when I'm in the waffle copter I'm just going around and round in circles.
How am I going to end
not being able, I do it when I ask questions, and I've done it twice already, maybe 3 times today with you, where I've just said something and I've gone, fuck, I haven't even got a question at the end of this. I've just made an observation. Idiot stuff.
The power of edit will fix that up, Jay.
Okay, so you come out the other side. You sell for 138 million. What does life look like on the other side of that sale? Like, there's other businesses and things that we'll talk about soon, but like, did you have a break? Did you struggle to find a purpose? Like, what was that period of life like?
I think the 42 Below purpose was so clear and so focused that when that left, it was actually, quite a loss. I didn't quite appreciate how much of a loss it was at the time until you would speak about it months later, and you get quite emotional about it because it was such a big part of your life just gone. But me, Grant and Steve, we got on well. We're all very different, all different skill sets, it worked well together. So we said, let's go again, so we formed a business bakery. It was probably, we realised that kind of the first album went all right, but we needed to do a few other albums. So we did Hyper Factory, met Darnell here today. That's how I worked with her. Look, that wasn't a big album, but went relatively well. We went into kind of technology, which was not my area of skill, and we probably realised at the end of that, actually, we don't know enough about technology, so let's not go into technology again. Ecoya Trilogy was probably the biggest commercial success, I guess, for an album. Really talented people there, amazing couple of sisters had started Trilogy. They'd done a great job, and we were part of assisting them and Ecoya in growth. And then Moa, I would say, was probably the most difficult album. You know, we came up with this amazing idea that people are drinking quality over quantity. Just as the kind of cocktail renaissance happened 10 years earlier, we can start seeing it happening in beer. I love beer. Let's get into a beer. But I think we probably had those same observations at the same time about 200 other people did in this country and around the world. And we quite quickly were in a very cluttered market. Dealing with supermarkets, which isn't a fun place to be.
To use that music and album analogy, when you were going through those different albums, was it about the creative process or just making album sales?
Look, this is why Grant and I think good combo. I think for me it was about the creative process. I think Grant had probably more of a pure business lens over it, and I think you need both. Yeah,
and choosing which creation to go down, like house fragrance is such an interesting place to get into.
Very interesting. In fact, that was Grant actually. When he said we should get into candles, I said, mate, you got rocks in your head. But he got me round to it, and it's a great brand actually, and still a great brand. Ecoya's doing super well.
I don't want to undersell, I sort of mentioned it before, bought Trilogy for 20 million and exited via a $211 million sale. This is a bigger sale than 42
It
Below.
is, yeah.
An incredible piece of business. And what sort of time frame was that?
I think we got into about 210, exited 218, so probably not far off 10 years again. Yeah.
And are you same thing, you're on a plane and you pick a trend around cocktails coming back. Have you seen a trend of people wanting their houses to smell nice?
Yes, in short.
Is it?
No, yeah, you're absolutely. So I guess...
Because it was always just Glade in the toilet was the only fragrance that people had when I grew up.
Yeah, well, and the great thing again, my time at Saatchi's and advertising at DDB, you become quite good at observing popular culture and moves and changes in popular culture. So the one that triggered that, if back in the day we saw people moving towards cocktails and drinking more cocktails, the observation was that people were becoming more house proud. You started seeing these shows on TV for the first time about, look at my house, it's beautifully decorated. And not only did we want our houses to look good, we wanted them to smell good. And so home fragrance, you could just starting to see, becoming an important part of our homes. Likewise with skincare, there's this realization that skin is actually the largest single organ in our body, bigger than our lungs, bigger than our heart. Obviously, skin is a huge organ. So women starting to realize, why on earth would we put a whole bunch of chemicals onto our biggest organ twice a day, every day for all of our life? That's probably not a good idea. What about if we could find a natural product that worked well? So it was those types of observations that led into those businesses. Yeah, and Grant, looking under the hood and making sure there's a good margin and all those things as well.
We've got a lot to talk about what you're doing at the moment, but just the last stop before we get there is, was there some Shane Warne BYC involved in the Moa Brewing days?
Look, actually, thanks to Nash, he introduced me to Chris Cairns, and both my boys were playing cricket, quite handy wee cricketers, and both were spinners. And Chris Cairns I was talking to him, talking about my boys as you do, a proud parent, and he said, "Oh, I know someone."
And he said, "Point cunt."
he probably should have, quite early, but he had patience to hear me out, and he said, "Look, I know someone who's pretty good spin bowler. If you're in Melbourne, let me know." So we're in Melbourne, and he said, "I'll get you a net session with Shane Warne." So we went down to see the Melbourne Renegades net session. Shane Warne could have spent 10 minutes with the boys and we would have been thrilled. I think an hour later we were still there, and we got talking. He was an amazing guy, actually, very curious, very open mind, very worldly. He started talking about business. He actually wanted to do something in the world of fragrance, when I said we had Ecoya. And so I said, "Look, I'm not sure about fragrance, Warnie, but what about beer? We'd just started on Moa." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, let's look at that. So we created a beer called 99 Not Out. Warnie's best knock with the bat, he got out playing New Zealand to what we now know was a no ball. So he shouldn't have been out. So and he helped us get that beer and more going in Australia.
Was Moa bigger in Australia than it was in New Zealand?
For a while, yeah, it was. That beer particularly was selling particularly well.
So you release these albums, some go better than others, and then in 2017...
You go unplugged.
Yeah, I see.
It's not a bad analogy.
You decide to buy Lake Hawea Station.
Yeah.
So 6,500 hectares it runs, and fact check me on these if the stats are off, 10,000 merino sheep, about 250 Angus cattle, a huge operation. Why?
Sitting one night in the office, I realised that, it's kind of got to get a bit of balance. Always love the outdoors, as you said right at the start. Always love the mountains. My boys love their hunting. I love my hunting. And I always wanted to do kind of what I thought I was going to do, which was be a farmer. And I realised actually, that's not just going to happen. At some stage, I've got to make a move. So we started looking at small farms around Queenstown, and we actually found 40 acres, kind of a lifestyle farm. We put an offer in on it, and we walked the boundary with the boys, and the boys said, "Dad, it's not big enough. There's some rabbits here, but where are the deer? Where are the pigs? What are we going to do after we shoot a few rabbits?" So we started looking further afield, and that's when I realised, actually, I would like to get back farming, and we found Lake Hawea Station.
There's quite a bridge between 40 hectares not being big enough and 6,500.
Yeah.
On the Te Aroha,
the Te Aroha Trail.
How does that, are you and Juzzy, are you kind of aligned in that this is what we should do?
No. Well, look, we are in many senses in that we both wanted to kind of put our environmental expressions to work somehow. We didn't know. I think it was also a time of naivety and thought. It was like, hey, there's a farm. We'd like to go farming. We'd like to do something for the environment. It needs a bit of work, that farm, but we should be able to sort that out in 6 months. 6 years later, and we're barely scratching the surface. So it the whole thing grew on us, really, and it was become a much bigger, harder, tougher project than we ever would have thought. Like 42 Below, if we had have known it would have been that hard and that tough, would have we have done it? I don't know, probably, but it's been a big one.
I asked you before about the cultural change from small town, rural South Auckland to Washington State in America.
Yeah,
you now move from Herne Bay down to
Hāwea.
Hāwea.
Yeah.
How was that cultural adjustment or that shift?
Well, it's definitely different. But you identify with people with similar interests and curiosity, and you go into a different sector. Like I'd been in farming when I was a teenager and at Lincoln, but it'd been a long time between when I was in farming. So, and I was kind of quite young back in those times. So all of a sudden you're in the thick of farming and you understand it's a whole new sector, a whole new culture, all these new nuances. And there are, like in any business sector, there are some incredibly sharp, progressive thinkers, and there are some who, I think are perhaps just keen to do what they've always done and don't want to move, and so there's quite a difference of views in the sector.
So you do carbon positive farming.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So when you're in marketing, the first thing you do is you go and speak to your customers or your potential customers. You try and find a competitive advantage. And so the first thing we did was pre-COVID is we went and spoke to fashion brands who are buying merino wool. And they said the 4 things they're concerned about or their customers are concerned about are climate change, the loss of biodiversity. A lot of them think that farming, takes biodiversity. They've heard stories about forests going and orangutans being lost, and so they think, okay, if you're in farming, you're bad for that kind of stuff. They've heard of this term regenerative farming, but they don't really know about it, their customers. And animal welfare is really top of mind for a lot of people buying wool. They think sheep are killed, to give over wool, or they're brutally harmed in shearing. So when you're in marketing, say, okay, if that's what's the key observations. We got to do something about those. So one of the first things we did is we measured our carbon footprint, our emissions. What we put up every year from our stock and tractors and things is 2,600 tonnes of greenhouse gas equivalents. But fortunately for us, there's a lot of regenerating forest and scrub and bush and emerging trees that are sequestering or removing carbon, and that's 5,500 tonnes of greenhouse gas equivalent a year. So that, as you say, Shay, that means we're climate positive. So we can use that with our wool and therefore get a competitive advantage. We've measured it, we've checked it. It gives you a story to tell to your customer, and we can now sell our wool for significantly more than others.
You certainly do have a story to tell. In 2022, Country Calendar released their most viewed episode of all time, which featured you. I've got a lot of questions here if you're open to talking about it, but were you surprised at the response to that episode?
Surprised at the time. I guess in hindsight, maybe not so surprised. So what was going on in farming at the time, 2002, you might recall movements like groundswell. You might recall big protests to things like Three Waters. And so farming in general was worried the world was becoming too woke, and they were, being penalised for it, basically. They saw us from the city moving to a farm. They saw, I think what they saw on Country Calendar is us putting mattresses down to give the sheep a soft landing, or painting the whiteboards white so we could see if, heaven forbid, there's any blood in the shed. They saw us playing, calmer music rather than hard-out thrash metal. They didn't actually see the fact that we're doing that for a competitive advantage and to get premiums, So we never said in that show, other people are doing it wrong, you got to do it this way. We just said we're doing this way because, one, we believe in it, we want to look after animals, and two, we can get a premium for it, and New Zealand needs to lift our earnings in agriculture. We're not being paid enough. But I think what some people saw was we were kind of waving some kind of woke flag and pointing the finger at others who weren't doing it our way,
And one of the things I've heard you say is it woke to want to make money?
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great response, but I don't know how that went at the time.
No, well, I guess we used that privately. And so, yeah, the episode ran. Look, I thought it was okay. We could have done some things different, maybe. I think we could have told our premium story a little stronger, maybe. But yeah, we're not on Facebook, but apparently Facebook erupted. And so, yeah, the criticism this time was quite personal. So it was personal not only to me, which is fine, but it was to Justine and the boys as well.
Let's not sort of sugarcoat. This was a really, really difficult time. Like the online vitriol coming your way, and it sort of escalated to death threats and threats of violence and things, right? Like an incredibly challenging time for something that you've put out, you're proud of what you're doing, and then you get this response. Like, it must have just been incredibly jarring.
Yeah, it was a tough time. And, to take letters to the police and say, hey, is this something we should be worried about? And the police go, actually, yeah, we should be worried about this. So,
I mean, emotion is also part of the story, because
yeah,
I think it's important. There's a human face. It's one thing to jump on a keyboard and smash someone. There's a reaction to that. Someone hits enter and send and then goes, all right, I'm going to go off and have my cup of tea now. I've said what I need to say. This is the actual reality of what is on the other end of that. And I think it's important to talk to that.
Yeah, look, we saw some of that. We, as Finn's great at balance as well, we also got a huge amount of support as well, largely from within inside the industry. So all the big producers, the big meat, wool and milk producers, the executives were sending us letters of congratulations and support and say, this is what we've been trying to say for a long time. They'd often do that privately, because they didn't want to ostracize some of the other farmers that they knew were supporting them. So there was support there. But I think when someone actually, when people drop mail in your letterbox, and it's quite threatening and incredibly personal with death threats. It's at a new level, which is was really surprising. And I talked about a time in New Zealand when I was really proud of New Zealanders supporting, the 42 Below brand. This was a time where I really questioned New Zealand.
And you're a proud Kiwi as well. I mean, as we've heard through the basis of this conversation, you've taken a New Zealand brand to the world stage, and now you're operating in our primary sector. Yeah, and getting this criticism.
Yeah, well, it was tough because, in sheep and beef farming, the Beef and Lamb New Zealand have come out with the stat, the return on equity for the average sheep and beef farm is less than 2%. So no one, farmers are doing it tough, which is the other, I guess, backdrop here, It's bloody hard being a farmer. You're literally working dawn to dusk. We know this now. Your to-do list is never ending. There's all sorts of stress points being a farmer. We have massive respect for farming just because it is such a tough, sector to be an operator in. So I get that, but the question is, how do you get out of it? How do you increase your earnings? How do you increase your margins? And there's 30,000 farms in New Zealand. We're not going to get out of that by all doing the same things. We're going to try different stuff. There's, ironically, in Silicon Valley, there's 30,000 different businesses. They're not all doing the same thing, are they? And saying, hey, let's all be the same, it'll work. They're all doing entirely different things. Some work, some don't. Obviously, by trialing stuff, by looking to change, looking to improve, looking to increase value, they've created probably more value than any other region in the world, So there's probably a few lessons for us there.
In terms of your story and your brand, after this went out and you had the feedback that you did you think it was important to get out again and kind of like restate your position, or did you kind of just barrel away for a bit?
Look, no, we kept going, yeah. Yeah, there's a line in Justine's book, Meet You at the Main Divide, which I think is keep going. So, we kept going. And look, it wasn't all one-way traffic and all negative and all, damning. There's some great supporters as well. I was recently in Gore, which is kind of the heart of groundswell and some of that movement. And a guy came up to me and just said, thanks for what you're doing, and, sorry that some of the country treated you that way.
It's interesting. Dion also mentioned that, it does take people like yourself sometimes to create extra headroom for other people to come in and follow. And I don't want to say it's incredible bravery to do that, but it is important, I think, that you do have these disruptors, is a term that I've heard used as well, or people that are trying to do different things to allow others to come through. It's sort of like that whole boot the door open and let's see what happens after that. So someone's got to go first.
Look, someone's got to go first, and we got to try stuff. I don't think agriculture has actually progressed that much in the last 50, 60 years. There was obviously a time when we were in New Zealand agriculture really progressive, like when someone in the Waikato invented the herringbone milking machine. Is this interesting stat? Every milking shed in New Zealand moved to become herringbone with something like 5 years. So we can do it. We can look at technology. We can look at progress. But I wonder if we've kind of lost that pioneering, curious nature that we may have once had.
So what are the opportunities in farming in New Zealand?
Well, there's a company, I think there's multiple. The world's going to need more food and fibre. Natural fibre is going to have to grow as we try and rid our world of plastics. If there's going to be some interesting stuff at the intersection of technology and agriculture. I think a great New Zealand example at the moment is Halter, the collars that can help manage your grazing. I think that company is now valued at 1.5 billion. There will be, and I hope more examples of that coming from New Zealand. I think New Zealand still needs to build a point of difference for what we do. Grass-fed, particularly meat and milk, should get a much bigger premium to what it does worldwide. And we're great producers of meat, milk, and wool. It should be getting a premium.
You talk about premiums a lot, which is interesting because you've got this dynamic within you of being a capitalist, but also an environmentalist at the same time. Is it easy for those two worlds to coexist within one person?
I think it is. I think it should be. And capitalism has become kind of a bit of a swear word. That's why I try and use the word conscious capitalism.
We've used worse words on this podcast so far than capitalist. Don't worry about that.
But look, I think private endeavour and private enterprise and companies like Halter or Rocket Lab or Zero in New Zealand can help progress New Zealand's wealth, and we do need to do that. Maybe we'll talk about that. Ireland's 15 years ago, same population, earnings per person, same as New Zealand. Now the Irish, their earnings per person, same population as us, is double. So we are as a country falling behind on many, if not most, measures.
But that environmental and that climate change is a cause which is really close to your heart as well, right?
It is, and from that there becomes opportunities. So the three, as I read some research recently, the three biggest concerns in most populations are divisiveness or polarization, misinformation, and climate change. So those are the three big kind of macro movements that are happening. And so as entrepreneurs, you look often to see, well, if that's where consumers are going, if that's where consumers' minds have been, if that's what consumers' minds have been occupied by, what do you do to try and, address some of those things? Climate change is even with, obviously the US momentarily pulling out of Paris, climate change is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. And that's why climate positive meat and wool is going to become it's going to get a premium and give New Zealand an advantage.
Is Lake Hawea Station all consuming for you at the moment? Have you got headroom, is something I've used a couple of times, to look at other projects or to start to think about doing other things?
Of the last couple of years, just. And one of those is, so we, as I mentioned, measured our carbon position. We measured the carbon sequestration, the removals. A lot of farms like us have emerging scrub or bush. It's been in gullies that 30 years ago that used to get burnt. Now they're not, because it's too expensive to spray or burn, and there's no farming value in there anyway. And so we've realised you can actually measure that and register it in the ETS and monetize it. And if your income is less than 2% of your asset value, which it is for most sheep and beef farms, we can all, as sheep and beef farmers, look for other ways of getting more income, whether it be generating electricity, tourism, or in sequestering carbon. And so we've now set up a business called Carbon Fields. It's a joint venture with an amazing New Zealand company called Car Fields, where we can measure other farms' carbon sequestration. Because farmers are too bloody busy, and don't really want to deal with reports for MPI and how to kind of get satellites to measure their farm, we do the whole lot. And so we've put over 100 farms now into ETS and earned quite a material amount of incremental income for farmers up and down the country. And so that's the new business. Me and a buddy climbing into Carbon Fields at the moment. Our goal is hundreds of New Zealand farms we can put into the ETS and earn that much deserved income for them.
Are there many other carbon zero, carbon positive farms in New Zealand?
There's a few now. Yeah, we're the first. There's a few now. Yeah, I think Toitu said, who did our there's more than a few, did our certification. They said soon after we did ours, there was something like 600 in the pipeline to get certified.
Tell us about Pure Advantage, because you're linked in there with another former guest of ours, Philip Mills.
It came, again, from really a time when the ETS was actually being looked at to launch in New Zealand, and a lot of businesses were going, oh no, this is terrible, this is all about cost. And I actually wrote a little op-ed for the Herald and said, hang on, this is about opportunity. If it's going to be the low carbon businesses of the future that will succeed. If the world is looking to slow climate change, they're going to go to those companies who are doing exactly that. So New Zealand is in pole position really to take advantage of that. So let's look at this as an opportunity. And unbeknown to me, Philip and some others were thinking exactly the same way. So Philip saw my op-ed and he said, hey, I'm thinking of throwing a group together. Do you want to be part of it? And so, he initiated Pure Advantage, which we've been part of since the start. We've looked at a lot of themes through New Zealand, that we think can be business advantages. We talked about, Shay, you talked about being an environmentalist and a capitalist at the same time, and I guess, crudely, that's what Pure Advantage is. Current project is called Recloaking Papatūānuku. That's getting about more native forest across New Zealand, which is in a way what Carbon Fields is doing as well. We've seen this crazy pattern of huge areas of land going into monoculture pine, which is we think bad for biodiversity. It's certainly bad for our income earnings because it takes good agricultural land away, whereas carbon fields, and I think what Pure Advantage is doing is about getting more native, more Aotearoa trees back onto Aotearoa, and that's better for biodiversity, better for slowing climate change, and better for our income as well.
Why do you think environmentalism gets such a bad rap sometimes?
Because not usually, sometimes it comes at a cost. There's a tension between environment and business, and that's not always the case. Like, I guess, at Lake Hawea Station, by taking that approach, we've actually shown it's better for business.
How many income streams do you actually run at Lake Hawea Station? Out of curiosity.
Just wool, lamb, cattle, and tourism. Yeah, and a few events, some weddings. If anyone wants to get married, it's a good place to get married.
So we've heard about Pure Advantage. This was an interesting line from Finn as well, that your sort of fingerprints are on a number of business titles. I think Wetty you've mentioned there as well. Live Ocean might be one of yours that you've coined.
Pacific Rose?
Yeah, how many how many business names can we kind of credit to your skill set?
There are a few. Yeah, I don't know why. Often people come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me name a business?" And by the way, if you guys have had to come to me, I couldn't have thought of a better name than Between Two Beers. It's genius. Look, there's a few other books and more. Yeah, Pacific Rose and Apple.
Is that? I wanted to ask. Is that
Apple?
Did you name the apple?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Enza was one of our accounts. When you're in advertising, you get a lot of those opportunities. So, managed to name an apple.
What other one? What have we missed any? Have we left any off?
We talked about Pure Advantage, Live Ocean. Yeah. No, that's a good enough set, I reckon.
Not bad. Not bad.
Keen to just dig in on family a little bit. Perhaps actually we start with Juzzy. Can you tell us about the role that all of the stuff, she has been there alongside you, and she has been the anchor, and she has been so fundamental in all of it.
Yeah.
But can you speak to what she brings to your world?
Well, look, amongst kind of many things, really, I guess for me personally, one of her great contributions and great skills is belief. She actually, if there are times when I'm not feeling confident or belief, she can bring it back. And so she's great at articulating the vision again when we need to hear it. And I guess keeping momentum, which is such an important part of our business. If ever the energy levels are starting to fade, she brings all that back and with gusto.
They say it's the most important decision you make in your life, right?
Well, it is, yeah. So maybe I have Papakura High School, maybe didn't add a lot, but I do have to thank Papakura High School for my wife, for sure.
What is the secret behind a long-lasting marriage or relationship?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and so we've been obviously together longer than we have, been apart. Look, I think, we managed to connect on the big stuff. Sometimes we might, have a few debates over, where a fence should go on the farm or things like that. But no, we certainly connect on the important stuff. I think we connect on our boys, and what's important to raising boys, and connect on kind of where we both want to be in life.
You talk about the boys and you talk about where the fence goes. Is everybody hands on the tools on the farm from a family perspective when they can be?
Look, in different ways. We have an amazing farm manager, Jack, who does really, kind of all the work really, but or the bulk of the hands-on work. But everyone in our family is very, very invested in the farm in a different way. Finn definitely from an environmental point of view. Gabe's building a hunting business there. Jussie, the tourism. I guess me, the merino. I deal a lot with our customers and where we think, how we think the premium can go and connecting with our customers. So, we're all heavily invested actually.
And can you talk about the boys? Our audience is parents, a lot of parents, young parents through to teenagers.
And sons.
Yeah. What have you learned about parenting, about being a dad, about raising boys or kids? And what?
Oh, good question. Look, Jussie, again, I have to thank her. She's a very invested, an amazing mother. She put a lot of work into motherhood even before it kind of came around. She read the books, went to the courses, was very curious about parenting methods, great at putting boundaries around the boys, whereas sometimes she calls me a jellyfish parent. Sometimes I let things go. So
I'm one of them too.
I think we're a good mix on that front as well. So what have I learned? I guess I borrowed a bunch off my own father, really, get outside, be active. I don't think I ever said to my boys, have endeavour, have curiosity, look to start your own business or anything like that, but both of them have, and I think both of them have a really strong work ethic. Perhaps, they've learnt that from Jussie and I from osmosis.
Yeah, you grew up, and Jussie, from humble beginnings, right? Your kids have grown up with very successful parents.
Yeah.
How do you create that same sort of, I'm not sure, the adversity or...
Yeah, I know what you're saying. We all want the best for our children, but we don't want spoiled little a-holes either, do we?
That's a way better way of saying it than he was trying to say. Then he was trying to say, yeah.
You got to manage that. You want to give them the most opportunity that you possibly can, but privilege is a dangerous thing. I guess balance, being thankful or grateful, that's kind of a woke way of saying it, perhaps, isn't it?
It's not woke to be happy.
No, it's not woke to be happy. And being grateful and acknowledging there's a truckload of people way worse off than you is a good thing, I think, through that process. That might help.
This has been such a cool episode. You're such a unique mix, like one of New Zealand's greatest marketers, and you're also running one of New Zealand's biggest farms, and it's kind of like the chapters of your life are just fascinating. I do want to tap on the well of the business advice before we let you go, because that marketing stuff was so good. Do you have wider business advice for young founders or anyone that's interested in doing their own thing?
We get asked for advice, Jussie and I, a lot, from startups. It's actually really hard to give advice because every business is different. So it's hard to make generalizations. I often say, my big regret at 42 Below was I didn't go harder, faster, sooner. So I often give that as advice. After you rereading those 11 tips of marketing, I think I'll revisit those and start using those again. I think, what I learnt with Grant and Steve is you're best when you're in a group of people. There's probably a sweet spot, maybe like a band, where a small group of talented people with different skills is brilliant. A large group of talented people with different skills is too unwieldy and it becomes a committee, and that's slow. But somewhere, in that kind of size of 4 to 5 really, interesting, smart people with different skills, there's a, if you can get that around you is really useful. Everything takes twice as long as you'd think and costs twice as much as you'd think. So if you're writing a business plan, double your expenses and double your time, and if it still works, then it's probably going to be a good business.
Love it. And what does it mean to be successful?
Well, I don't know that I practice this myself, actually, but I think, ultimately, why do we do these things? I think personal reward, knowing that, look, unlike Posty and Nashi, I didn't play for my country, but knowing that you've ideally contributed something, to the country, and then family really ultimately is what it's all about, and I guess my own kind of definition of that is being able to have adventures, with your family.
One of the coolest things about this sort of podcast journey we're on is just the connections and the people we meet. And it has been so cool linking your story to Jay's, and we've had Nashi writing in. And I'm going to sort of round us out with a guest that we recently released, Al Brown, who is also one of the loveliest men in New Zealand. Al writes, Geoff is one of the really few special people you get to meet in a lifetime. Softly spoken, wise, selfless, thoughtful, kind, generous, clever, and also a super thinker. He is often the quietest in the room, but if words are forthcoming, you better shut up and listen, as you will always benefit from Geoff's wisdom, or point of view. I have certainly benefited from your words across this one. Like, it has been so cool. I just really, I've learned so much from it. I've just been inspired, and just wanted to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time.
Pleasure, guys. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Great. As I said before we started, what a great name for a podcast. And in a world where, media is getting small, snack-like, and potentially, we're being misinformed. It's great to have, proper research. You obviously done a truckload of research before I got here, and proper, investigation. So thank you for what you're doing for New Zealand.
You too, Geoff. Cheers.